and welcome to Woodbee's Carpool Movie Critique, where each week Kelley, Remi, James, and I see a new movie and critique it on our ride home. This week we saw Dunkirk.
So, while the movie was actually, good, it looks good, it was ambitious, and I really liked the concept that Nolan brought to the table. Unfortunately, I ended up being uninspired when the movie ended. Uninspired, and I don't think it says too much about the quality of the movie. It's more my personal feeling. And in truth, right now, I am still not quite sure what I think about the movie.
Are you just kind of bitter because they left all the French behind?
Well, you'll talk about that when it comes to the history thing. But I do think that the root of this feeling is coming from the fact that I felt attached to none of the characters, probably because of the lack of dialogue. At least that's my guess. There's an exception actually in that. It's the skipper in that small pleasure boat that comes to the Dunkirk beaches. Mr. Dawson with his two sons. But even then, I was never really sucked into those scenes because it's a technical issue for me. It's because they switched cameras, or the type of cameras, between the dialogue scenes and the rest of the scenes. And it shows, you could see at the top and the bottom of the screens, the letterbox, the black bars, they would flicker on and off depending on the scene, and that bothered me. I just couldn't get sucked in.
Traffic drama.
Yeah, so they use the IMAX cameras for all of the battle scenes and all that, and they use a 70mm camera for those dialogue scenes, and to me it showed, and that was an issue. But anyway, I feel conflicted because I like the ideas that Nolan brought to the table. It's just didn't do anything for me. That's annoying. And then also the last thing I would talk about is I was expecting, given the scale of that retreat, like 300,000 soldiers, a bunch of ships, and a bunch of planes. That's the historical factor that I believe James is going to talk about. We saw none of that scale. We saw a couple planes, we saw 2 destroyers, and we barely saw hundreds of troops.
Yeah, we saw like the beginning and the end, but not like the full.
And it looked like hundreds, not like the full on 300,000. And that's due to Nolan's reticence in using CGI for this movie. So there's a reason behind it, but to me, it kind of didn't do anything for me. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in terms of authenticity, that's one minor thing that I would mention, is that they didn't quite capture the scale of just how enormous and how impossible, on paper at least, Operation Dynamo should have been. And it felt like most of the evacuation was happening while you weren't there.
Yeah.
Which is, why else are you watching the movie? But other than that, I think they did a very, very good job of maintaining a lot of authenticity. They made great use of actual Second World War assets. For example, all of the Spitfires, they used real working Spitfires. True, not all of them are the right mark. We're getting technical now. One of them I've actually seen up close and personal, and actually got to sit in when I was...
Nice.
It's like 7 years ago, something like that.
7 years ago.
Yeah,
Oh.
same plane in that movie, so that was pretty
So
damn
not
cool.
just the same model, it's actually the plane.
Exactly the
Wow,
same
that's
plane.
pretty fun.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
What else?
How does it hold up as a World War II film, or a war film in general?
As a war film, I think it's they did a very good job of capturing a lot of themes present in a good war film. Like loss, fear, anger, all those things. But at the same time, they managed to achieve all of that without making it super gory, like Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers in the Pacific.
And that's one of the choices I liked, actually.
Yeah,
it was
but
not necessary.
at the same time, they were still able to make each death, even if it was just, an extra, just brutal, because they're there 1 minute, and then the next minute they're gone. They're completely gone. They've been removed, and that's just horrifying. And that's theme that is very, very prevalent throughout the entire film.
Yep.
Anytime someone dies, gone.
Yes.
That's it. And
you have to move on. There's just no time for mourning.
Yeah, it was crazy to see after the bombing from the Luftwaffe. You see all of the British soldiers just going back in line, forming a queue for evacuation, as if nothing happened.
National pastime. You know?
Exactly.
But anyway, I think honestly, the crowning achievement in terms of authenticity and how it stands up as a war movie, it didn't have any actual true real life accounts from Dunkirk in the movie. It's all cobbled together from eyewitness accounts and certain people who were there. What Christopher Nolan was clearly trying to do was trying to get you to feel what it was like there. And I think he did a tremendous job of doing that.
Okay.
I think a lot of the choices that Christopher Nolan made actually brought that to light. So, he wanted to focus on young, inexperienced British men. So those are exclusively the cast choices that he made.
Yeah.
A lot of these main actors in the movie had never done another movie or had only done, small projects previously. I thought that was interesting. Also, with the casting and the characters, most of the time I did not know anybody's name in the movie.
Yeah,
so
same here.
I was feeling close to these characters, but I couldn't call them by their name. I couldn't think of them as a person other than this British soldier. And for me, that made this movie all the more real, because I felt like how I imagine I would have felt if I was a soldier there in that situation.
To me, the lack of dialogue though created some distance. I don't know. I feel like I didn't know who they were. To me, they were Soldier A, B, and C, and this is the stuff that was happening to them. So that even though I felt the tension that no one wanted to transcribe, I didn't feel anything for those characters.
Well, I think that's kind of goes to the immersive quality of it. So instead of The Darkest Hour, where it's top down, when in Dunkirk it's all about the feelings of the moment. And I went back and forth on that. Is it bad that I don't feel closest to each one of these or not? Because it does feel very real, because the bombing happened and they went back into straight lines. So you see these people, you feel for them, but then they die and you can't be attached. So in a way, it's like, it's not the best storyline, but I think he was really going for more of an immersive quality based on the sounds and the feels. I mean, the sounds of the screaming bombs as they come in is just terrifying.
Torpedo gun.
So I really feel like he was going less for a story and more for what it felt like, and I felt like I could smell it almost and hear it and feel it.
You can actually see that. I mean, with the length of the script, right? It goes to prove your point, right? It's less about the story in itself. The script was half of what a regular script usually
75 pages.
Exactly, you can see that because there is no dialogue, basically, for the whole movie. And it really proves your point, I think.
Most of the dialogue in the movie is either from an old man and two kids who aren't soldiers. Or by a bunch of dudes in cockpits with masks over their faces.
Yes.
It was really hard to understand Tom Hardy.
It's really hard to understand him to start with.
It's like World War II Bane. I would like to shoot down this guy.
What's up with all those directors putting masks over his face all the time?
It's because his teeth. It's his teeth. He needs to get them fixed. That's what they're trying to tell him. And I say, Tom Hardy, do not get your teeth fixed. Barbara Streisand did not get her nose fixed, and that was great for her career. So don't get your teeth fixed.
I don't think he needs that for his career anyway.
Okay, Kelley, what else do you have to say about the casting?
Yes.
So in terms of the characters, I also wanted to come back to the point that we don't see any Churchill on screen. We don't see any Germans on screen, which is kind of unheard of in a World War II film, in my opinion. And yet this is the highest grossing World War II film ever made. I also thought that there were some interesting choices on Nolan's part so we mentioned that the script itself was very short. Initially, he had wanted to go completely unscripted, which kind of cycles back to your feels, having it all about the feels. I also really liked his choice of filming it at Dunkirk. Like, they had done lots
Yes.
of location scoping, but despite all of the issues that it presented of being on the same location, it brought a real authenticity that kind of goes back to the fact that they used some of the same ships, some of the same planes. And for me, the last character or casting piece I want to talk about is Mark Rylace. I thought he was phenomenal. So this is Mr. Dawson.
Okay.
But if you've seen Bridge of Spies.
Oh,
Bridge of
yeah, that's him.
Phenomenal.
Oh, he
right?
was really good. Did he get a nomination for that role? Yeah, he did get an Oscar nomination
Absolutely
for a
did.
supporting role. Yeah, that was great.
And
Yes.
so, we've
Yes.
talked about the fact that these
That's where
were
he's from.
the unknown soldiers, but I feel like the character that really rose to the top was Mr. Dawson and this mission of him taking his personal boat out and who is it? Peter and George, I believe, were the two young boys.
Peter and George.
Oh my gosh, heartbreaking.
Yes, that's true.
So that was what really.
I do have to say,
Okay.
I'm sorry. George, in his dying scene, I was like, he's either not going to die or he's a really bad actor, because I do not buy that he's dying. If a superficial head wound like that, you're going to bleed a little bit, but you're going to have a bonk on the head. And it wasn't until he said he was blind that I was like, oh, maybe he is going to die.
Yeah,
but I just didn't get that from the kids. Sorry.
It's no bleeding, yeah. Whatever, it's medicine. All right.
That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Anything else, Kelley?
No.
All right.
Let's check the
It's
rank
time
ratings.
for the envelope.
And we pull out the envelope.
James gave this movie, Dunkirk, a 4 Bs.
Nice.
It's a good movie. They captured a lot of really important things. They got the feeling right. I could not stand the fact that it wasn't played chronologically.
Okay.
That annoyed the shit out of me.
Oh, that's a Nolan thing, though.
Oh.
That's a classic Nolan.
Chris!
All right.
All right, Kelley gave Dunkirk 3.5 Bs.
So for me, it was a lot of little touches. If you were tuning in last week when we did Darkest Hour, you'll see that I gave it a tiny 2 Bs. And for me, this had so much more emotion wrapped up into it. Nolan made the conscious choice not to get bogged down in the politics, which I appreciate. Thank you, sir. He also brought his uncle in. Remember the blind man? That
was
is
his
John
uncle?
Nolan, Christopher
Oh.
Nolan's uncle. So, I mean, there was just so many aspects that made this a much more enjoyable film for me, even though I do not like historical films. I do not like war films. So, from 2 in Darkest Hour to 3.5 in Dunkirk.
Okay.
All right, Remi gave it 3 Bs.
I did. So I do see all the qualities in this movie. This is why it's obviously above average, above a 2.5. I give it a 3 because there were some really smart and creative decisions there. I cannot go above it just because I didn't enjoy it as much as I think I should have. Anyway, so 3.
All right, well, I gave it 3.5 Bs because I did get the feels and I did get the immersion. However, and I honestly like editing out of sequence. However, if you don't have military history, it was hard to grab an anchor in like, oh, that's the same boat, or oh, that's the same plane. And if I didn't have a military history buff next to me, I would have been lost. So even though I did like it, it was beautiful, and I did get the feels, 3.5.
All right.
Well, thanks for tuning in this week. You can come back next week for another Carpool Movie Critique, and hit that subscribe button if you like the content we're throwing at you. We're also going to put up some of our previous videos. Check them out.
See you next week.
See ya.
Bye.